That 4.8 million years ago, the world of our distant ancestors was neither a jungle Eden nor an endless savanna. It was a patchwork. Riparian forests braided along riverbanks, thickets and gallery woodland shading seasonally wet floodplains, and open grasslands stretching into heat-shimmering horizons. In East Africa, where much of the early hominin story unfolds, tectonic rifts were lifting mountains and creating new basins. Monsoon rhythms pulsed through the year, and resources moved like tides in a landscape of boom and scarcity. Fire was not yet a tool. Purpose-made stone technology was still far in the future. What our ancestors had were bodies adapting to mixed terrains, clever hands, opportunistic minds, and a palate shaped by survival rather than preference. To imagine the survival diet of early humans at 4.8 million years ago is to peer into a transitional chapter between ape-like foragers and later hominins with heavier chewing muscles and robust jaws. Anatomically, the best analogs are likely very early hominins, forms close to Australopithecus, whose world leaned toward wooded mosaics rather than open grasslands. Their teeth and jaws suggest they ate a range of foods softer than those tackled by later Australopithecines, yet more varied than typical rainforest apes. They were generalists, easing their way through the seasons by eating whatever the landscape offered and their bodies could manage. Their diet was not a static menu, but a flexible, moving target that tracked ripening cycles, rainfall patterns, predation risk, and the social choreography of small groups on the move. A landscape that dictated the plate diet begins with ecology. At 4.8 million years ago, East Africa's climate oscillated between wetter and drier phases, shaping a mosaic of habitats: riverine forests, woodland edges, marshy fringes, and open grasslands carpeted with seasonal seeds. Fruiting trees clustered along watercourses, underground storage organs, tubers, rhizomes, and bulbs hid their calories beneath soil that softened after rains. Insects surged with moisture. During the dry season, certain plants concentrated sugars in tissues or seeds as insurance against drought. This patchiness rewarded mobility and variety. A forager limited to one niche could starve when its preferred food vanished. A generalist, willing to climb for figs, strip leaves in a pinch, flip rotting logs for grubs, wade the shallows for snails, and dig for tubers with a stick, had a better shot at surviving the lean months. The menu was thus a calendar of availability. Early morning might be spent moving between fruiting trees while it was still cool. Midday might drive the group to shade, where leaves, soft pith, or insects could be gathered with low effort. Late afternoon could bring a chance to crack seeds with a found stone or to scavenge a small carcass before hyenas arrived. Teeth as clues, not certainties. The mouths of these early hominins, smaller canines than apes, moderate enamel thickness, and relatively generalized molars, are like historical documents with half the pages missing. They tell us the diet included fruits and other soft to intermediate foods, and that it was not specialized for the extremely tough, gritty fare that later robust hominins would crush. But they also leave room for variability. Wild fruits vary in hardness. Seeds can be tender or armored. Leaves can be young and pliant or mature and fibrous. The ability to chew a broad spectrum of textures, even if not optimized for the hardest items, afforded dietary flexibility. Dental wear and microdamage patterns, tiny pits and scratches left by food, on later hominins show seasonal shifts and fallback strategies. At 4.8 million years ago, something similar likely occurred in a less pronounced way. During rainy seasons, ripe fruit could dominate. In drier spells, harder seeds, bark strips, or underground tissues might leave subtle signatures of tougher chewing. The point is not that early hominins preferred these fallback foods. They ate them because the alternative was hunger. The core foods: fruit, leaves, and hidden carbohydrates. Fruit and sugary pith. Fruit was probably the backbone of the diet when available. Wild figs, drupes, and other C3 woodland fruits package water, sugar, and micronutrients in conspicuous, colorful packages that mammals can see and smell. Selecting fruit is a cognitive task. The best fruit is often patchy, ripens briefly, and must be located and defended against competitors. Early hominins that could remember spatial locations and seasonal cues, where the figs ripen after the first storms, where the riverine trees tend to fruit late, had a caloric edge. Soft pith from reeds or young stems, sweet with sap in certain seasons, offered another low-risk carbohydrate source that could be stripped with incisors and modest hand use. Leaves, young shoots, and flowers. Leaves are fallback foods par excellence. Young leaves tend to be tender and less chemically defended than mature ones, offering protein, minerals, and some energy. Flowers and nectar, where accessible, were brief windfalls, while the cambium, the living layer under bark, could be chewed for moisture and trace sugars. None of these are dessert foods. They are the slow, steady fuel that keeps a forager going when glamour foods are scarce. Underground storage organs, USOs, perhaps the stealth heroes of the survival diet, were the carbohydrates hidden below ground: tubers, bulbs, and rhizomes. These are drought insurance for plants and life insurance for foragers. Digging them requires energy, time, and sometimes rudimentary tools, sticks, or opportunistically used stones to loosen soil. Many USOs are starchy and can be fibrous or bitter raw, but even raw they deliver calories and water. Early hominins, lacking controlled fire, could not cook them into the soft delicacies later humans cherished, but a careful selection of less astringent species and the ability to peel, pound, soak, or chew and spit fibers would have brought in reliable energy during hard times. Protein and fat, small, opportunistic, and often invertebrate insects, grubs, and termites. The most dependable animal protein on ancient menus is small and numerous. Termite alates, winged reproductives, erupt in swarms after rains, delivering rich packages of fat and protein in a short, frenzied harvest. Soldier termites and larvae within mounds could be accessed with sticks or probing digits, yielding modest but meaningful calories. Beetle grubs and caterpillars inside rotting logs offered similar returns. Such foods require minimal risk, little travel, and no competition with apex predators. Ideal for small-bodied foragers balancing safety and nutrition. Mollusks, amphibians, and small vertebrates in riparian settings, snails, freshwater mussels, frogs, and small fish stranded in seasonal pools are low-mobility, high-payoff resources. Picking snails off vegetation, finding mussels in mud, or scooping trapped fish in receding pools demanded attention and timing more than technology. Small lizards, fledgling birds, or rodents nabbed opportunistically would diversify protein intake. Importantly, these items posed fewer risks than large carcasses ringed by hyenas and big cats. Scavenging and marrow. True persistence hunting and weapon-assisted hunting are far down the timeline. But opportunistic scavenging, finding a recently abandoned kill or a predator-overlooked limb, would have happened. Marrow inside long bones keeps its calories after flesh is gone, and a found stone used as a hammer could fracture bone to access fat-rich marrow. The absence of formal stone tools at this state does not preclude percussive behaviors. Apes today use stones and anvils to crack nuts without making tools. A hominin who learned where carnivores cached a kill, watched vultures to locate carcasses, and approached at the right moment might crack a bone, scoop marrow with fingers, and add dense energy to an otherwise lean day. Water, minerals, and the chemistry of survival hydration is part of diet. Fruit supplies water, as do pith and young leaves. Rivers and pools are obvious sources, but they are also ambush points for crocodiles and predators. Timing visits, example midday when big cats rest, and using multiple small water sources could reduce risk. Salts and trace minerals matter too. Certain clays or salt-enriched soils might be licked or ingested in tiny amounts. Buffering plant toxins and supplementing electrolytes, behaviors seen in many mammals and plausible in early hominins. Foraging as a social strategy. Food choice is never purely nutritional, it is social. At 4.8 million years ago, small groups likely foraged together with overlapping home ranges. Sharing may have been limited but not absent. Fruit patches are defensible. An individual can benefit by excluding competitors. Insects and leaves are divisible and widely available. A mother with a dependent infant needs reliable, predictable foods that can be gathered while carrying, while juveniles learning by observation would practice safe, easy collections like picking berries or stripping leaves before tackling riskier items. Simple proto-sharing could have emerged around rare wingfalls. A termite swarm too abundant for one individual to consume, or a cracked bone with more marrow than one belly could hold immediately. These moments reinforce proximity and tolerance, which in turn enhances predator detection and mutual defense. Division of labor as we know it, formalized roles, is anachronistic, but differentiated foraging by age, sex, or reproductive status is common in primates and likely existed. Pregnant or lactating females gravitating to reliable carbohydrates, adolescents pushing into riskier niches, energetics, seasonality, and fallback foods. The hallmark of a survival diet is not what is eaten on the best day, but what sustains life on the worst. Seasonality creates bottlenecks. Weeks when favored fruits vanish, water recedes, and the caloric cost of ranging between patches rises. In those weeks, fallback foods carry the group. Underground organs that require labor but pay out. Tough seeds pounded against a root or stone to crack hulls. Termite mounds probed when other animal foods are scarce. And leaves, uninspiring but omnipresent. Fallback foods influence evolution. Even if eaten less often, they shape teeth, jaws, and digestive strategies because they set the minimum functional threshold for survival. For early hominins with relatively generalized teeth, the balance between soft fruits and more demanding fallback items suggests selection for versatility rather than specialization. Those who could chew a bit harder when needed, tolerate a bit more plant toxin, or learn where to dig when the rains failed, were the ones who reproduced. Risk, predators, and the cost of a meal. Every calorie has a risk price. Climbing for fruit risks falls. Approaching a carcass risks ambush. Lingering at a waterhole risks crocodiles. For a small bipedal ape navigating a mixed habitat, safety calculations bent diet choices toward foods gathered quietly and quickly. Fruit plucked on the move, insects flipped from logs, plants dug from soft flats, snails picked along reed beds. Predators crowd the crepuscular hours, so activity timing matters. Midday lethargy in shade conserved water and energy. Late afternoon productivity tried to front-load the evening's safety margin. Carrying food is another risk and benefit calculation. Arms unburdened aid climbing and sprinting to trees. Arms laden with a bonus of figs promise a safer evening but slow the body down. Simple caching, dropping picked fruit at a favored resting tree and returning for more, builds small buffers. Hands, even without tools, are diet multipliers. Cognition in the forager's mental map. Food knowledge is culture in miniature. Learned places, seasonal pulses, the texture and smell of toxic leaves, the look of a safe tuber, the call of birds that reveals a fig tree and peak fruit. At 4.8 million years ago, cognition likely centered on these competencies. A juvenile school was the foraging day. Memory stitched together a mental map where the river elbowed and slowed to pools with snails, which tall fig leans out over a game trail and drops ripe fruit at dawn, where termite mounds run richer after the first storm. Social learning amplified success. One individual's discovery could ripple through the group, adding a predictable item to the seasonal repertoire. What was not on the menu? The absences matter. No controlled fire means no cooking, so many starchy plants stayed fibrous and less digestible. Some toxins remained unbroken. Without formal stone tools, nut cracking and marrow extraction occurred with opportunistic percussion rather than efficient, repeatable reduction strategies. Large game hunting is not part of this picture. Social coordination and weaponry to do it are later. Dairy is obviously absent. Cereals and routine seed grinding are deep in the future. The survival diet at 4.8 million years is thus a portrait of raw foods, small packages of animal protein, and labor invested in extraction rather than transformation. Gut, microbes, and the internal toolkit diet is half what the mouth gathers and half what microbes make of it. A forager eating raw plant matter ingests fibers that gut bacteria ferment into short-chain fatty acids, hidden calories that soften the cost of fibrous fare. Chewing pith, nibbling leaves, and swallowing bits of soil-laced tuber carry a microbial rain that colonizes the gut and tunes digestion. Occasional geophagy, clay ingestion, could bind plant alkaloids and soothe the stomach. While we cannot reconstruct the microbiome in detail, a high-fiber, omnivorous, raw food diet implies a gut ecology tuned to extract energy from plants and tolerate variable inputs, with periodic protein spikes from insects and small vertebrates. A day in the survival diet. Imagine a late rainy season day. Dawn breaks and the air is cool. The group moves toward a gallery of riverine trees known to fruit after the last storms. Adults scan the canopy while youngsters pick fallen figs on the ground, dodging wasps and checking for rot. By mid-morning, bellies are satisfied but not heavy. A few individuals break off to a shaded patch where reed stems grow. They strip pith, watery, sweet, and chew idly while grooming and watching for predators. As heat builds, most of the group settles under a grove with a clear line of sight. A fallen log, sodden from recent rains, keels back under prying fingers to reveal pale grubs. Each mouthful is a quiet bonanza of fat. An adolescent notices the glint of a mud snail in a nearby puddle, and soon a few are squatting at the edge, plucking shells, cracking the apex on a convenient stone, and sucking the meat. In late afternoon, a faint commotion of vultures draws eyes to the horizon. A cautious approach reveals only scraps, tendons, and a stripped limb. Risk is high. The group's boldest individual lifts a cobble and drops it on the limb shaft. The bone splinters, marrow pools, a few quick scoops, and they retreat to trees before hyenas drift in. Evening brings a slow walk along the riverbend, where the sand stays damp. Here, someone has learned that a certain sedge hides mild-tasting tubers. A stick pries up the root mass, the skin is scraped with incisors, and the core is chewed, fibers spat, starch swallowed. The day ends with bellies not stuffed, but secured. Evolutionary consequences of eating like this. This survival diet selects for bodies and minds attuned to variety and extraction. Bipedalism, the capacity to move efficiently between patches, to carry food, to see over tall grass, pays dividends. Hands with fine control, even without tools, enable peeling, prying, and cracking. Teeth evolve for general competence rather than extreme specialization, an insurance policy against ecological swings. Cognitive traits, spatial memory, social learning, risk assessment become part of the foraging toolkit. Over millions of years, these pressures would set the stage for later dietary revolutions. The adoption of robust jaws and teeth in some lineages facing harder fallback foods. In others, the emergence of toolmaking, meat scavenging, and eventually cooking, each step unlocking new nutrients and lowering digestive costs. But at 4.8 million years ago, strategy trumped technology. Flexibility, not fire. Breadth, not blades. Myths to lay aside. It is tempting to imagine a paleo diet as slabs of meat and handfuls of nuts under a big sky. The reality at 4.8 million years is humbler and more ecologically grounded. Meat appears as a rare bonus. Insects, snails, and small vertebrates make the animal protein baseline. Plant foods are not just salads. They are sophisticated arrays of seasonal fruits, fibrous piths, chewable leaves, and underground starches that require knowledge to find and effort to process. Far from a monotonous fare, it is a diversified portfolio managed against risk and scarcity. Why this matters today? Understanding the survival diet of early humans is not about prescribing modern menus. It is about appreciating the deep time logic of our biology. Our ancestors' success rested on flexibility, seasonal rhythms, and nutrient diversity, not on a single perfect food. Their bodies were tuned for movement across landscapes, for intermittent access to energy-dense items, and for frequent reliance on fibrous plants mediated by a cooperative microbiome. If there is a modern lesson to glean, it is that dietary resilience, variety, seasonality, and the capacity to pivot sits at the heart of human adaptability, a cuisine of ingenuity. At 4.8 million years ago, the survival diet of early humans was a cuisine of ingenuity. Fruits mapped by memory, leaves and pith chewed under shade, tubers pried from damp soil, insects teased from wood, snails and mussels plucked from shallows, marrow seized in the split-second gap between predator and scavenger. It was a diet paid for with attention, risk, and social coordination. A diet that built bodies capable of walking farther, hands eager to pry and pound, and minds attentive to time and place. A cuisine of ingenuity. At 4.8 million years ago, the survival diet of early humans was a cuisine of ingenuity. Fruits mapped by memory, leaves and pith chewed under shade, tubers pried from damp soil, insects teased from wood, snails and mussels plucked from shallows, marrow seized in the split-second gap between predator and scavenger. It was a diet paid for with attention, risk, and social coordination. A diet that built bodies capable of walking farther, hands eager to pry and pound, and minds attentive to time and place.